All right, says I am recording. So again, hello. Today is Tuesday, the 20th of September. All right. And two things as we get started. The first is I sent everybody an email out almost a couple hours ago. And as it said, please remember that your Node.js test revisions are due tomorrow. Each one of you should have gotten a separate email from me telling me what I was looking for. All right. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a few different things as we start to get into working on a REST API project. If you don't know what any of that means, that's what at least part of today is about. The other thing I want to tell you quickly is just a couple minutes ago, I sent you out about 4 or 5 URLs that we're going to be looking at throughout the day today. All right. So you don't have to do anything with them now, but when I allude to something, you'll know what I'm talking about. All right. Okay. So with that said, let's start out by actually doing something. All right. And what I mean is I'm going to change. Let me start up Visual Studio Code so I have it up and running. And I'd like you to just go onto your desktop and just make a folder. I called mine demo. You can call it anything. It is literally just that. And bring that folder up in Visual Studio Code, if you would, please. So I'm going to close. I've got it running, doing other stuff. Okay. All right. So let me change my share, and then we will get going. All right. So we're going to start out. Like I said, you're not turning this in. This is for nothing. As far as all I want to do is just show you a couple things. Now, I want to tell you how this came to be. All right. Yesterday, I had a student they were taking their hands-on test in the C# class, and we're through chapter 7 already. We're doing great as far as timing goes, at least so far. And you know as well as I do. So I'm just going to come in here and just make a file, and I'm going to call it getpost.html. You'll understand why in a minute. But the point is, you know that you make comments like this. So if I've got a multi-line comment in C#, we do this. All right. And I thought I had explained it in class, but I had a student yesterday who couldn't figure out why his screen was entirely green, and he had done that. So in other words, he had started a comment, but rather than closing it, he just started another comment. And his whole screen was green, and he must have looked right past that in that he couldn't see it. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, sometimes I think that I basically just suppose that anybody in any of my classes, well, you get this, you get this. Maybe you do, and maybe you don't. I think most of the time when I expect that people get something, my expectation is you do get it. All right, you understand it. I get that. All right. But I think there's sometimes when I have a tendency to either rush through things or, like I said, suppose that you know something when you may or may not actually know it. So the reason I'm telling you that is some of this stuff that I'm going to explain right now might seem a little redundant, but I want to make sure we're all starting from a level playing field. All right. So that might be John if you want to let him in. So with this getPost.html, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to view terminal, and I'm going to start up a terminal right here. Okay. Again, you can follow along. You can just watch whatever is comfortable to you. All right. And I'm going to start some of this at least kind of the way that we've been doing it. In other words, I am going to do an npm init, but we're not saving this. We're not doing anything special with this. So I'm just going to put in the -i. I'm sorry, -y. So it'll accept all the defaults. All right. Now I've got my package.json. Okay. And I'm not even going to worry about going in there and monkeying with anything that's in there. It's totally fine for right now. So again, I went in, I'm creating a file in here. There's no file structure in this. I'm calling this get post. You're going to understand why in just a couple minutes. All right. And I made an npm init -y to just get basically the bare bones package.json file. All right. And then we're probably not even going to need it for now, but I am going to do what we usually do. And then I'm going to say npmi, and all I'm going to add here is express. So I'm going to do an npmi express. You know as well as I do that makes the node modules folder. And after the npmi express, I'm going to do an npmi minus capital D of nodemon. And again, hit enter. So I've got all that stuff. All right. Okay. So right now, not even worrying about the stuff that's in my terminal. We may or may not even use that. So all I'm going to do is take my terminal and really reduce it a lot. All right. And I'm going to come in here. Okay. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to work with this get post HTML file. Again, I'm saying things here. When I get done, you might say, I already knew that. And if you did, that's good. All right. But just in case, all right, is why I'm doing this. Okay. So in here, I'm going to hit the exclamation point in a tab, or try that again. The exclamation point in a tab to get my template. And I'll just call this get and post. Doesn't matter. You don't even have to name it. All right. And in here, I'm going to start with an H1 tag. And it's just going to say get and post method examples. That's all it's going to say. All right. And it's going to have two forms in here. The forms will be exactly identical. The only difference between them is with one, the method will be post, and with one, the method will be get. All right. So I'm going to come in here and make an H2, and I'm going to say get request. And after that H2, I'm going to create a form. I'm going to say here, let's see, action equals, we're going to be eventually working with our books thing. So I'm going to say /books. All right. And I'm going to say here method equals, and it's going to be get. All right. So there's my beginning form. It's going to be a really simple form. It's going to have a label, two labels, two text boxes, and a button. So let's make that label. Oops, sorry. Label 4 equals first name. Get rid of this. Here we come on. Yeah, there you go. We won't even need an ID just because we're not doing anything, but we will give it a name. I want you to get used to start using the name field. We could put a placeholder in there. To be honest with you, it really doesn't even matter. All right, and I'm going to put in a button. Type equals submit. And I'll just call it submit. Now, all I want to do here is I'm going to save it. And this may not show on yours, but I want to bring it up in live server to make sure it. Okay. So I put in first name. I guess I forgot to put in my last name. So I'm going to copy these two down and make a last name. Okay. All right. So I now should have a first name and a last name and a button. Not fancy, not anything. Again, I don't care about really how it looks. Type equals submit. That shouldn't be submit there. That should be button, shouldn't it? Somebody please correct me when I screw up. All right. So button type equals submit, submit. All right. That's how I want it to look. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to copy everything from the H2 down. Before I do that, I'll add a couple line breaks. And then I'm going to paste in this one. Why? Because this one's going to be a post request. Right? And the method here, again, will be post. All right. Everything else is the same. All right. So I'm going to save this. And I'm going to look at it in live server. And it looks just the way I want it to look. So I can go back to it and show you it, but there's nothing special about this. There's an H1 tag at the top that says get and post method examples. Then underneath that is an H2 that says get request. Underneath that is a label that says first name and a first name text box. To the right of that is a last name and then a last name label and then a last name text box. And to the right of that is a submit button. And then I've got the exact same thing duplicated, but with a post instead of a get. All right. So again, they both look like this. The only difference is one says get here and here. So there, and the other one says post. Other than that, they look the same. There's no kind of surprise here. All right. There's nothing here that should be any kind of surprise to you. All right. Okay. Now, if you've done this, and again, if you're just watching, that's fine. But if you've done this and you go out to live server, what you should notice is, and I'm going to make this bigger on my screen at least, and I don't know if you guys can even see this, but I'm going to put in Jeff for the first name, and I'm going to put in Scott for the last name, and I'm going to click submit. And what you should see, don't worry if it says cannot get /books, we don't care. What I want you to understand is if you look at the address bar up on top, it's got 127.0.0.1, which is the loopback address, :5500, which is what? That's the port this is running on, /books. And then it says question mark, first name equals Jeff and last name equals Scott. All right. So the point is we've got a query string. And again, that shouldn't be any kind of a surprise to you. If I go back then and I run the same thing, but put it into the post request one and put Jeff in there and then Scott and hit submit, nothing happens. It comes back and it says the page isn't working. All right. And you should understand what that means. What we were attempting to do was to basically have it bring up another page. We were attempting to post that. I have said to you several times, you have heard this, that basically that post, back up a little, that get is kind of synonymous to doing a select statement in a database management system, or it's similar in CRUD to the read. All right. Post is like an insert or an update, or the C and the U in CRUD. Delete's kind of its own animal. All right. We're going to look at that in just a couple minutes. But again, that should make sense to each and every one of you. All right. Now we're going to bring this up, the same thing up in Postman in just a minute. But before we do, I made this, where is it? I made this little chart that's kind of ugly, but I wanted to go over it with you. So bear with me for just a second, if you would. All right. I'm going to actually, because I'm not going to keep it, I'm going to put this at the bottom of my file, but I'm going to put it inside of a big comment. And I'm in an HTML, so. All right, so I'm going to put this in here. I don't know how well it's going to come up on here. Not terribly, but not great either. All right. Just to again go over the differences between using a post and using a get. All right. So again, get is used to retrieve information. It is possible to use get and change information, but that's going against the norm. So it's not recommended that you do that. All right. Get should basically just be used to retrieve information. What you're going to see as we keep going on and on in this class is a lot of times what's going to happen is when you bring up the get routine for a certain page, it's going to bring up a form. When you fill out that form and click submit, then the post for that page is going to take place. That's quite often the way this is going to work. That's the kind of project we're going to start up in just a few minutes. All right. As you saw when I put my name, or maybe you didn't see it, but if you tried it yourself, you did, that when we did the get, the data is sent using the query string. That's one of the reasons that, of course, you typically don't use get when you are submitting anything, because especially if there's any kind of sensitive information, you don't want to share that because it comes up right in the query string. All right. In other words, as it says there, that information is visible. It gets tacked on to the URL. All right. Now there's good things and bad things about get. One, as it says, is there's a limited amount of data that can be sent. All right. I know like for IE, it was always like about 2048 bytes or something like that. All right. And that's a bad thing because it's limited. A good thing is you can bookmark what you put in there with a get. All right. On the other hand, when you look at a post, as it says, is used to post data to a server. So whereas typically get is used to retrieve information from a server, post is typically used to send information to a server. All right. And it's used basically for the write and for the create and for the update. All right. So the C and the U part of CRUD. Data is sent, as it says, they're not in the query string, but in the request body. That's one of the reasons that unless people know how to dig through a query string, all right, they're not going to see any of the data. Now, that said, and you're going to learn this as we go on in here, when you've got things like passwords that you put in, you'll still want to encrypt them. Just going and putting them in a post doesn't mean that, if people know what they're doing, they possibly can get in and dig through the post body or the post headers, I should say, and find out that information. All right. You can send any type of data. And as it says there, example JSON, because that's what we're going to be doing sooner and not later. Finally, as it says there, you can send much more data. All right. I mean, I've read anywhere up to 2 gig that you can put in there, but you cannot bookmark it. All right. So again, that probably, if you say, geez, I knew all that. Well, that's good. But again, like I said, I am kind of getting tired of just assuming that when I say something that everybody knows what I'm talking about. All right. And one thing I appreciate about you guys is that typically when you have a question, one or more of you will ask. All right. I've only got 1 or 2 people out of my morning class who are coming on a regular basis to this live. And one of them, he's very bright. He's doing very well in the class. But almost always I'll say to him, Grant, do you have any questions? No, that don't make sense. And the sad thing about that is sometimes I will have people who are watching this on tape who are like, I have questions, and I tell them, just like I've told you before, if that's the case and you're watching the tape, pause it for a second, write down the question and email me the question. All right. Sometimes what you're going to find out is if you keep watching the tape, the question will be answered. But sometimes if you don't understand something, again, I used to sit there, and Michael, you can say this because you're the only one, I believe, out of the people watching live right now that has had me in a live classroom class, that there were several occasions when I'd say, does everybody get this? And then I would say, can you shake your heads up and down if you get this? And and I would not want to go on until people were doing that. I don't have that luxury right now. All right. I know some of the instructors who are either teaching online or who are teaching in a blended format are requiring their students to have webcams. All right. And they want to be able to look all the time and see what students are doing. I don't like that. I mean, I don't think that's a right thing to do. You know, if I'm lecturing and you've got to get up, your phone rings or whatever, nature calls, I don't care. And you come back, I don't have a problem with that. All right. So the next thing I want to do then is I want to go here into Postman. Now, I'm going into Postman, and Postman actually assumes, okay, that I've got a server hooked up. I don't have any server hooked up. All right. So what I can do, if you remember, I've got to go back and look. So give me a second here. And I will change my share in just a second. So I brought up Postman. Let me change my share. All right, so I'm in Postman, okay? Now, if I come in here and I type this in, so I come in here and I pasted in everything I took from before, which is http://127.0.0.1/5500/getpost.html. I don't know if it's going to work if I try to send this or not, but I've got here, I don't want to post, I want to get, and I'm going to click send. All right, and that's not what I wanted. So let's see. I said /books, so that's what I want to put there. So /books. All right, so I put in http://127. I could put the word localhost in there too. It's the same thing. /books. I click send. All right, it comes back and it says cannot get. I'm not sure why it did that, but I was hoping at least it would show me something. The point is this. You may have noticed this before. You may not have. All right, but if I come in here and start adding a query string to where I am, so I say question mark, first name equals Jeff ampersand last name equals Scott. You may or may not have noticed, but down here, it's filling out the parameters for me. The reason I'm bringing that up is you have your choice if you start adding parameters to your query string. You can either add them directly in here, all right, or you could add them in here. So if I wanted to add another one here, I could come in here and say, I don't know, occupation, IT instructor. And you see that it is still building up my query string. All right. Now, is that a big thing? No. But what I do want you to notice here is if you look, there is no body. There's no body that I can end up sending in here when I am working with a get. On the other hand, if I come through here and grab this same stuff that I had in here, just change this get to a post, it's not going to work. All right, it's not going to work. But I can go to body now, and then I can go, for example, to raw, and I can choose the type of data I want. All right. So really, when you look at it, basically, get is a read-only type of thing, whereas post is a read-write type of thing. Again, if I run this, I'm going to get the same kind of, get nothing, and that's okay. All right. It's not set up to really do anything, so that's fine. All right. But again, I wanted to make sure, all right, that as we start going through this stuff, that what we're doing at least makes a little bit of sense to you. All right. Okay. So that said, what we're going to start doing in just a couple minutes, if nothing else after the break, is we're going to come in and we're going to create what's referred to as a REST compliant API. A REST compliant API. So let's break that down a little bit. That means I'm going to change my share again. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go back to the internet. All right. And to start with, I got to close a bunch of this stuff I've got open because I don't need it anymore. All right. Now, back about 14 or 15 years ago, there was a gentleman, I had his name written down, but I forgot it. As part of his dissertation, all right, as part of his dissertation for his doctorate, he wrote this thing that you see on your screen here that's on REST. I'm not going to read a bit of it. All right, I'm not going to read a bit of it. Okay, but you have to start to understand what REST is. First of all, it's an acronym. The RE is from the word representational. The S is from state. The T is from transfer. All right, and to put it kind of in a nutshell, all right, what REST represents basically is it's a set of guidelines for how a client and server can communicate. All right, and even more than that, perform basic CRUD operations on a resource. And the project that we're going to be working with starting after the break is we're going to be working on a books resource. All right, and for now, we're not even going to worry about, all right, for now, we're not even going to worry about the database. All right, we're going to fake it. We're going to put some fake stuff in there. If you say, I don't know what you mean, you will soon enough. All right, sometimes when people talk about REST, they talk about RESTful systems. And really, a RESTful system is a system that complies with REST guidelines. All right, and what are those? Well, I went over to Wikipedia and I found this funny. I don't know if you've ever seen this. This article may be too technical for most readers to understand. Please help it make it understandable to non-experts. Okay, all right, but they've got their own definition in here. I'm not going to read it. All right, they say here that it defines 4 different constraints. Identify your resources. Again, that's going to be for us, our books. Manipulate our resources. That's CRUD. Self-descriptive messages. So again, typically, if you are able to successfully delete something, you want to give them a message, all right, or a way to make sure that it worked. And then it says hypermedia as the engine of application state. I don't even know what that is. All right. But as it says here, REST has been employed throughout the software industry and is widely accepted as a set of guidelines for creating stateless, reliable web APIs. All right. A web API that obeys the REST constraints is RESTful. Kind of what I just said to you. All right. So this is the guy, Roy Fielding. Okay. And if you want a little bit of history on him, that's it. I'm not going to go over any of that stuff. They show you the architectural concepts here. I'm not going to go over that, but it's actually pretty good. I read it before class today. All right. But I do want to quickly mention this. Again, these are the constraints. All right. So it says that if you want something to be truly RESTful, this is what you have to follow. So these are basically some guidelines. All right. The constraints for making these guidelines, it says performance can be a dominant factor. And let's face it, you might have the best program in the world, but if it's slow as heck, no one's going to use it. It should be scalable. All right. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about scalability and why the stuff that we've done so far where we've looked at databases is not really scalable. It should have a uniform interface. Yeah. As it says, modifiability of components to meet changing needs. What does that mean? Well, if it turns out that you decide that you want to add a field to what you're showing or delete a field or whatever, you should be able to do that pretty simplistically. Visibility of communication between components by server agents. It should be obvious. There are certain words that you typically use. All right. Portability of moving program code with data and reliability. All right. So it comes in here, and I'm not going to read these. It's very interesting, in my humble opinion. 15 years ago, in fact, more than that, probably closer to 20 years ago, I was teaching at Black Hawk Technical College in Janesville, Wisconsin. And one semester, a decision was made that we were going to have two classes that we were going to start offering that were not part of the program before. They were Client Server 1 and Client Server 2. And in my opinion, at least, it's amazing how those words have persisted over time. All right. And what I mean is, client is still the client, server is still the server. Well, over time, internally, the way clients work has changed somewhat, and the way servers have changed has changed somewhat. All right. But it says you want to enforce the principle of separation of concerns. We have talked about this a little bit either in this class or other classes. All right. The trend today seems to be giving as much power as you can to the client. In other words, making what's called a fatter client and taking away power when possible from the server. So making a thinner server. All right. Virtually all earlier types of applications had a fat server and a thin client. All right. This next one, again, it's something that everybody should understand, that by default, the web is stateless. As it says, no session information is retained by the receiver. So in other words, if I go ahead and make a request to the server, and then 5 seconds later I make another one, by default, the server has no way of saying, oh, that's the same guy who made both of these. All right. As it says, that's what makes them ideal and high volume applications. Cacheability. As it says, you can cache responses. All right. That can make it faster than if you do something and then a couple seconds later you do it again, type of thing. Okay. All right. It's a layered system. A client cannot ordinarily tell whether it is connected directly to the end server or an intermediary along the way. That isn't always true. All right. Typically, if it takes a while till you get what you're asking for, you can typically assume there's not a connection between you and whomever is supplying the information to you. All right. Code on demand. As it says here, servers can temporarily extend or customize the functionality of a client by transferring executable code. Okay. And finally, the uniform interface. As it says, it simplifies and decouples the architecture. I'm not going to read any of these. You can see them. Again, the only one that I'm not real familiar with is hypermedia as the engine of application state. All right. But all that stuff, I'm at least hoping, makes a little bit of sense to you. Again, here are the HTTP methods that we're going to be using. All right. Why? Because the most common way of really approaching the whole topic of REST is having the ability to format URLs. I've already shown you a little bit of that with the query string. All right. And also using these HTTP verbs in applications. All right. So we've looked at this before, but again, part of me thinks that I kind of pushed you in the deep end to teach you how to swim. All right, so we're backing up a little bit. So you should understand the difference that get basically to retrieve, post if you want to send something out to the server, and then there's put and patch. When you do put, you are replacing the entire record. So if I do put and I tell it to replace a record, and that record has 5 fields in it, and I give values for 2 of the fields, but I don't give values for the other 3 fields, then typically what's going to happen, especially if I'm working with a database, is those other 3 fields, all right, they're just going to get whatever the default values are. That's not typically what you want to do. Typically, rather than doing a put, you want to do a patch. And a patch is a partial update. So if I do a patch and I show these two fields to be updated out of 5, those 2 fields should be updated, and the other 3 should retain the values they had at the beginning. All right. There's delete, which is pretty self-explanatory, and there's a few other ones. Like it says there's options, there's headers, and there's a few other things. All right. So again, I guess for lack of better words, I have to suppose that you get this. All right. And that makes some sense. Okay. All right. Let's see. So what we're going to start doing is we're going to start creating our own RESTful API. All right. Rather than using the database that we have, what I did, and it's one of the URLs I sent you, is, it's right, where are you? Right there. All right. There is actually a site online that's called books.json, and it's got what's referred to as 100 of the best books ever written. All right. And out of there, I grabbed this, and again, you've got the URL for it, and it's 8 different books in the field that we're in. And you can see that every one of these books has an ISBN, has a title, has a subtitle, has an author, etc., etc., etc. All right. So we're going to start working with this. All right. I'm not sure how far we're going to get today. I've been doing it. I'm literally a few steps ahead of you. All right. So we're going to go to a certain point today. Once we get to that point, we're going to stop, whether that's at 2 o'clock or whether it's at 1:30. All right. And I should have the rest of it finished tomorrow, because not only do I want to have it written, but I'd like to have it tested, because I hate giving you guys stuff and then having it not work. All right. Okay. So that said, let's go in and start doing some of the stuff we typically do. What do I mean? Well, you should know this. So let me go back. I'm gonna fix my share in just a second. Okay. But we don't need that demo anymore. If you think that was a waste of your time, then I'm sorry. But we're going to create another. I'd like you to please create another folder on your desktop. And I just called mine Books API. You really can call it anything you want, but I call it Books API, all in lowercase. So Books API. All right. This is the first one. In fact, let's call it, I just thought of this. Let's call it Books API 1. Call the folder Books API 1. All right. Now I'm going to change my share. Go back to the internet. You kind of know the drill by now because we've done this enough times. Please go out to GitHub. All right. And let's create a new repository in there. And I'm going to call it the same thing. That is Books API 1, all in lowercase. So Books API 1. All right. I don't care whether you make it public or private. You're not going to turn this in anyway. As always, I'll make mine public. And as always, later on, at least, I'll post that out there on the system. All right. So I'm going to go down and click Create Repository. Then I'm going to grab that line here, that Get Remote line, because I like to set that right away. I'm going to grab that, copy it to the clipboard. All right. And as soon as I do that, the next thing I want to do is change my share and get into Visual Studio Code. So let me do this. I know you can't see it, but all I'm basically doing is setting up VS Code so that I'm going to be able to bring that folder in, the Books API 1. All right, now that's all done. So change my share again. All right, so I'm in here. I've got Books API 1. To start with, let's start by doing the stuff that we normally do. What do I mean? Well, I'm going to go over here to View Terminal, and under Terminal here, I am going to put npm init, but I'm not going to put the -y in here. All right. And pretty much we're just going to accept the default. So Books API version 1, description, a simple application. Move this over. Program, interface. I'll put a simple RESTful. Application program interface. Okay, that's good. The entry point, I like to call mine app.js. It doesn't really matter what you call yours. This test command, we're not doing anything extra with testing in here, so I'm just hitting enter. The git repo, all right, actually, if I want to, I can come in and paste that in because I've got the repo, but I don't want the git remote add origin. So this is my repo, right? Whoops. Thought that it would, it's not letting me change that. Well, that's interesting. All right, I thought it would let me do that, but it doesn't look like it lets me go in and modify it much. That's fine, I can fill it in later. Keywords, again, API, REST, RESTful. I don't know, that's fine. The author is me. Oops, well, I meant to put my whole name in, and MIT. All right, is this okay? Yes. So I am going to go into the package.json file and just tweak it a real little bit here. That's fine, that's fine. Yeah, that's all fine. I'm going to change it, put in my name. Okay, that should be good. All right. Oh, I'm also going to do what I always do in here, and that is get rid of the test line, make that start. And dev start. Nothing special about those words. If you don't like my verbiage, you can put in your own. This one should always be start, and this should always be node followed by whatever JS file you're running. All right, and you need that for some of the server packages that we're going to be looking at in just a bit. So this one will be nodemon app.js. Again, nothing new here. All right, so that's my whole thing in here. So there's the name, the version, the description, etc. All right. So that's everything that I've got. So I'm going to save that and close that. Then I'm going to go down into my terminal again, and I'm just going to add what we typically add, and that is I'm going to say npm, try that again, npm I express and npm I minus capital D nodemon. You know as well as I do by now that doing that, we now have our node modules and our package lock in addition to our package.json. All right, to get started then, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a new file right under books here. That'll be my app.js file. All right, I'm going to make this smaller again and come in and start putting in the stuff we typically put in. So I'm going to put in here const express equals require express. All right, I'm going to have, we're going to use the path module in here. So I'm going to have const path equals require path. Path, remember, is one of the built-in modules that's available to you inside of Node.js. So in other words, Express is part of the Node package manager. Path is a native module to Node itself. All right, we've talked about that kind of thing before. So we've got that. Let's set up a port. And I'll make it 2345. It doesn't really matter, again, what you make it. All right. Now there's going to be, as you'd guess, there's going to be more stuff that we're going to be putting in here shortly, and that should make sense to everybody. All right. We also want to do our const app equals express. Okay. And then finally, I'm just going to come down here and do an app.listen for my port. And no parameters, but I do want to put in here an arrow function. And it's just going to say that, you know, console.log. I don't know if you know this, but I think I can just type in log and it puts that in for you. Just a Emmet shortcut. I never remember to use it, but my backticks app running on port. We'll use a template literal again, as we usually do, and put that in. I don't need that semicolon at the end. So that's all we have so far. And I realize ain't doing much. I get it. All right. But let's make sure at least that what we have so far is up and it's running. So I'm going to do a file save. I'm going to go back to my terminal and I'm going to type in npm run dev start. And if it does come up and say app is running on port 2345, that's all we can expect right now. All right. That's exactly where we should be right now. All right. Now, I'm taking for granted that every single thing that we have done so far in class makes sense to you. And I have to take that for granted because nobody's asked questions. All right. So I'm not saying, I mean, if you got questions, of course, ask. But this is also for the benefit of those people who are watching this on video. All right. I do have some people that pretty much, when they have questions, they regularly do email me, and that's fine. I've got other people in this class. I'm not going to say who they are, and it's fine because they're doing fine in the class. But never ask a question. I have to take for granted they're watching the tapes because they're turning in the homework. All right. And that's fine. Like I said, I just want to make sure that we're at a certain point, of understanding. All right. So it is 12:55. Let's take 15 minutes. For whatever reason, it's very hot in my house today. So let's come back, please, at 1:10 and we'll continue on. All right, let's start back up again. You may have noticed, and hopefully that's what you're seeing on your screen right now, is I've gone out to a website that's ejs.co, okay? And EJS is embedded JavaScript. Okay, what it is basically is it allows you to do templating. And if you say, I don't know what that means, you're going to see it right now. What we do in here when we're working with Node is a lot of the templating, all right, a lot of the templating that we do, you do it using either EJS. There's other ones. There's one that's, there's Jade, which is also called Pug. There's Handlebars. There's Mustache. I mean, a lot of them have goofy names, as you can tell. But one of the reasons that I chose EJS is, first of all, A, there's a lot of documentation on it, and B, EJS, from what I've read, was actually written by the people who created Express. All right, but any of them would work. The only difference between them is the syntax. All right, now in a month, whatever, we're going to be getting into where we're talking about React. And when we talk about React, all right, rather than using this, all right, we're going to end up basically using something else that's called JSX. You don't have to worry about it right now, but I'm just telling you that what we are going to be able to do with this is we're going to be able to embed JavaScript right inside of our HTML files. All right, and I don't want to go off on too big a tangent, but I do want to mention you because I find this interesting. All right, that for years, what happened was people would break every rule when they were creating websites. In other words, people would have a lot of inline CSS. They would put JavaScript right inside of their HTML files, etc. They broke a lot of the rules that both me and Mr. Gudmested try to teach you to not do in the AWD1111 class. That said, the reason you're doing that is supposedly you want this separation of concerns. In other words, your JavaScript should be in JS files, your content should be in HTML files, and your presentation should be in .css files. But what this does is it kind of goes against that because it allows you to embed JavaScript right inside of your HTML files. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to make some changes. We'll talk about those changes, all right, for the rest of the period here today. Remember, because you guys asked for this, all right, I'm not going past like 2 o'clock because I said I would only go 2 hours. All right, 2 or 3 people had said that to me, that these 3-hour long talks, these marathon talks are too long. So I said I'd cut it down. Plus, it'll give you some time if you're still working on fixing up the test that you'll be able to do that. All right. So the key thing is, as you might be able to guess from looking at this, is what you see here and what you see here. All right. Those are referred to as scriptlet tags. All right. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, let's look at this. It says, what is the E for? Embedded. All right. And that is what it's for. All right. Now, I'm not going to read any of this, but I do want to mention one thing that I find interesting. All right. Is it says in here that it has a simple syntax. You may or you may not agree with that as we start looking at it. All right. There's not a whole lot to this site. I'm not going to read a bit of that. You do have to install it. So we are going to go back in just a couple minutes and do our npm I EJS. But see this line right here? Hopefully everybody can see this. It's in blue right now that says let EJS equal require EJS. That is no longer needed. You don't have to. Once you install it, you don't need a require. In fact, if you put a require statement in, even if you're using EJS later on in the program, that require statement will remain gray as though you've never used it. All right. So the recommendation is, yes, you want to come in here and do an npm I of EJS, but that you don't put this in. All right. I'm going to just start going down. Why? Well, I'm going to keep going down. I want to go down to here, and I'd like you to do the same, or else look at what I've got on the screen here. And it says tags. All right. Now, it's interesting because when you see this first one, it says scriptlet tag for control flow, no output. All right. And then there's a bunch of other ones. I was always taught when I started going through this stuff that these were all referred to as scriptlet tags. But the first one that you see right there that says scriptlet tag, it does not allow you to do any output. And if you say, I don't know what that means, you're going to see it in just a couple minutes. All right. What you can do with that is you can use it to put in if statements and while loops, etc., right into your HTML files. Now, in order to use this, guess what? We're going to have to add another folder. And when we create these, like we won't have an index.html anymore. When you're using EJS, embedded JavaScript, all your files have an extension of .ejs. All right. So this first one here, as it says, for control flow. So really, if you want to do any kind of programmatic things in here where you're not printing something out, you use the less than sign followed immediately by the percent sign. All right. The white space, we probably won't even have to worry about this, to be honest with you. All right. The next one that's here, it says outputs the value into the template, HTML escaped. All right. That is where you're actually going to be printing stuff out. All right. The next one that's right next to it is the same thing, but whereas this does an HTML escaped, here it's unescaped. It's easier to show it to you than anything else. If you need to add a comment in there, you do that. I don't think I've ever added a comment. If you need to actually show a percent sign, you've got to do it like that. Regardless of which one of these here you use, regardless. 999 times out of 1,000, if not more, you're going to always end it like this, with just a percent sign and a greater than sign. All right, so we're going to start actually creating some of this stuff momentarily. Now, this is where I haven't had a chance to totally test everything. So there's a chance that when we get into this, something will fail. I hope it doesn't, but there is always that chance. All right. And also, just so you're aware of it, all right, as we go in here and we start doing this, there are going to be a lot of different paths that we're going to be putting in. These paths are routes. What I'm hoping to get out of this project that we're doing is a few things. All right. Number one, all right, we're kind of doing it right now. All right. In other words, we're getting into EJS syntax. Number two, we want to be able to bring in the database stuff. And there'll be even a few more things. So this is not, it's not really a go-to because there's, like I said, there's not that much in here. They tell you how to include it. I've never looked at any of the CLI stuff. I don't like most of the examples that they have in here. You can look at it, and if you think it's good, hey, cool. All right. But basically, I believe all this does, like if you go to license, it just jumps out. The whole thing is a one-page site. So all the stuff that's here is just going to, well, that's the GitHub itself. So I guess that's the repo for it. But this stuff here, you know, about, etc., that's the same stuff I showed you before. All right. All right. So again, I'm not expecting that that totally made sense to you, but we're going to try to do a few things right now. And to try to do those things is going to necessitate me going back, changing my share, and going back into Visual Studio Code. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, I do want to mention one last thing before I do that. During the break, I sent you one more URL, and we're going to look at that later, but that is, where are you? Well, I got it here someplace. Otherwise, I'll open it up later. There it is. And that is from expressjs.com. This thing has got a wealth of information in it. And I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit as we go and start adding some code to our app.js file, because again, my goal is to make sure that you understand what it is we're trying to do here. All right, so with that said, let me change my share. And I'm going to go back into VS Code. All right, so I'm going to bring my terminal up, and the first thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to stop the app from running, and I'm going to do an npm I of EJS. npm I, so I'm bringing embedded JavaScript into the program. All right, and hit enter. All right, let me clear that. Make sure I didn't break anything, so I'm going to start this back up again. npm run dev start. Still working? That's all good. All right, so let's start talking about what we have to change. The first thing, and I already mentioned this to you, do not put this in. You'll notice right now, if you look up on the screen here, Express and Port and App, none of them are grayed out because they're all being used. All right, we've got Express in here, we're using the app and we're using our port. All right, but path, since we are not using it yet, we will in just a second, is grayed out. We do not put this in. Const EJS equals require EJS. You don't get an error if you put it in, but it'll remain gray regardless. So there's really no reason to put that in. All right. All right. So that's first thing. Now we're going to come in and we're going to start adding some middleware. And if you don't remember, I gave you this explanation before, although it's not a great one. Middleware is basically, you can write your own middleware or you can use third-party middleware, which is pretty much what we're doing. So it's going to go out and provide additional functionality so that we ourselves don't have to sit there and write a lot of code. A lot of it has been pre-written for us. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add 4 lines of code in here. All right, so, and I don't believe the order matters, but I'm going to put in here app.set. I'm going to go over all of these when we get done. Now I'm using path, so you notice already, hopefully, that path is no longer grayed out. If I remove it, it becomes gray. As soon as I put in path right here, it's no longer gray. I had always been putting in for the extended thing in there. I had always been putting in false. The more and more I read of this, people are putting in true. All right. I don't think it matters, but I'm going to put in true anyway. All right. So I'll give you a second to put in those 4 lines and then we will go over what they mean. Now, as we go over what they mean, I'm giving you the Jeff Scott abridged version of what they mean. What I'm telling you is, if you want a better explanation, description than what you think you are getting from me, I can appreciate that. All right. And then you would want to go out to that last URL I just gave you, which is the expressjs.com URL. But I'm going to give you my 2 cents worth or whatever you'd call it on these lines of code right here. All right. The first one says that the view engine that we're using is EJS. If we were using Pug or Jade or something, we would change this. But we are going to be using embedded JavaScript. That's what we just installed. So that's what we're telling the system that we're going to use. All right. Now, one of the things that's expected, if you remember a long time ago, we talked about MVC, Model View Controller. All right. And right now, we're working on the views. All right. What we've always done is we may have put a folder or two underneath here, but we pretty much have been just taking everything and putting it all right underneath here. That's not the way you're supposed to set programs up. And in fact, that's not the way you've really been allowed to really set them up in here. So what we want to do is I want you to go up to books up here, and I want you to go and add a new folder. And that folder will be called views. Okay. It should be right underneath books. So it should be right there at the same place like node modules is. All right. And under views, so I'm going to click on this and I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to put another folder under there. Now you don't have to do this. When I say you don't have to, what I mean is some people put their EJS files right underneath views. Since we're working on a books API, I'm creating a folder called books. All right. So what we just did was we came in and under our root directory, which is books here, or books API, whatever we said it was called, we added a views folder. Under that views folder, we added a books folder. In just a couple minutes, under that books folder, we're going to put in an index.ejs file. All right, but let's go through these first. So again, the first one says we are setting our view engine to EJS, embedded JavaScript. The second line, line 8 there says, all right, where will our views be held? And we're saying that it's going to be in our directory, underscore dir name is this. It's books API. And we're joining to that the word views. So again, what we're essentially saying is that we want to use the views folder that is under books API. All right. We've already gone over the URL encoded. All right. And the last file, or the last line, line 10, is if we do want to come in, and use, so if we want to come in and use some JSON, we will now be able to. This line here basically is us being able to handle the equivalent of HTML forms. All right, that's really what we're doing with the URL encoding in there. This is going to allow us that if we want to write, read, or whatever and do stuff with JSON, we're going to be able to do that. All right, so hopefully at least that made a little bit of sense. All right, so next, let's go in, and the order in which we do some of this stuff really and truly will not matter. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do this. With where we are, we're going to add our first route. So I'm just going to put a comment there that says routes. And I'm going to say app.get / all right, and where do we want to go? This will look similar, but yet a little different from what we've done in the past. All right, we're going to do a res.render. Got to spell it right. Try it again, Jeff. Res.render, and we're going to say books / index. Now, right now, if you tried running that, of course, it wouldn't work. We haven't even created that file yet. All right, but I wanted us to have that route available, and that's res.render. Good golly. All right. So I wanted us to have that route available. Ideally, in just a couple minutes, when we go out to books / index, the stuff that's in the index.ejs file is what is going to be rendered. All right. Now, sometimes, and I cannot explain this to you. I mean, there's stuff that happens when you use some of this software I just don't get. What do I mean? Sometimes when we do this, sometimes it works if you need to put a slash there, and sometimes you don't. What do I mean? That means in some projects, I've left it off like I'm trying to do right now, and it's worked just fine. In other projects, it hasn't. So we may, if we get an error after we do this, we may have to go back. And when I say we may have to tweak it, that's what I'm talking about, as far as we may have to tweak it. All right. So let's go in and click on your books folder here. And then underneath that, we want to add a new file. And that will be index.ejs. All right. And that should be under views books, because if it's not going to work. I always like to do this, and you won't see me do it, but I'm going to quickly go back and I'm going to look where I've got my books API 1 and double check and make sure it's there. So I now have a views folder that has a books folder under it that has an index.ejs file underneath that. That's good. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. All right. Now, we're going to be writing some EJS, and what you can do, and again, these, you're working on your machine. I can't see what the heck you're doing, etc. But I'm trying to give you some help if you think you might need it. What am I talking about? If you go down on the side here and you go down to extensions, which is halfway down, all right, and then you search in here and you type in EJS, all right. One of the things that's in there, well, there's language support, all right, but another one is snippets, all right. And again, if you ever see two things with the same name like this, I always go for the one that's got the most downloads, 294K versus 29K. But I'm going to go in and it says EJS language support for Visual Studio Code. I'm going to install that one. And then I'm going to go down to the snippets and I'm going to install that one. All right. You do not have to install either of these. You do not have to, but it can end up saving you some time if you do. All right. And again, if you don't agree, or if you have them and you start using them and they don't seem to be working right, just don't, get rid of them. All right. So let's come in here. We're going to try something right now. And again, as I told you before, this has not been totally tested, but we're going to try it anyway. So let's put in our exclamation point and hit tab. We haven't written anything. This is straight HTML first right now. And let's not even put it in our body. Let's try putting it in here. So we're going to, for now at least, we're going to type in homepage. Okay. And I'll just put an H1 tag in here that says, this is the homepage. Big deal. All right. This is what I'm doing just to start. All right. And now I'm going to do a file and I'm going to do a save. All right. Now, for lack of better words, is going to be the moment of truth for what we've done so far. I'm going to stop this. So I'm going to stop my app running and I'm going to restart it again. I don't probably have to do that, but I want to anyway. So I'm going to do another npm run dev start and hit enter, and it should start right back up again, and it has. All right, now you won't see this because I'm tired of doing all these shares, but I'm going to go out and on the internet, I don't remember oops, I do not remember what port we used. I thought it was 2233, but let's double check. It is 2345, okay. So I'm going to come out, I'm on the internet again, and I'm going to put in here localhost :2345 /books/index. Of course, it says cannot get /books/index. Not good. Okay, I got an error. So I'm going to jump back into here and I'm going to try putting a slash there. All right, I think this was all right. Yeah, that looks right. All right. And I'm going to try it again. And it's still giving me the same error. All right, in fact, I think I've saved and it should have auto-saved for me, but save. All right. Whatever doesn't work today, that's where we're going to start tomorrow. All right. So if, like I said, if it doesn't work, it's going to be okay. We will get it to work by tomorrow. All right. And I don't know if I told you this, you probably don't give a darn, but I am going to tell you anyway. Yesterday, again, I had a hands-on test. I was working with people till 10 o'clock last night, and it's even worse than that. I live in Lake St. Louis. We had 6 power outages yesterday. All right. And I was plugged in. I probably should have just went off after battery after a while, but I was plugged in. So I'd be working, boom, the machine would just fart and I'd get nothing. Then it would come back up again, etc. So one of the guys I was working with, he was like, did you get my email, etc.? Yeah, but I couldn't respond. All right. So that's why, no excuse. I'm just telling it like it is. So like I said, we'll get this to work. I have.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
I had the same stuff as you written down in my works.
Okay, that's good. You didn't need the slash there?
No.
Okay. Hey, if somebody's is going to work, I'd much rather have it be yours and not mine. All right, that's okay. That's totally fine. All right. But what I want to start showing you is how you can write some EJS in here. All right. So I'd like you to go back. And I don't know, Michael, I don't know about you and Clayton. If you're John, I think that was you who said that. The other two of you, does yours work or not work?
No, I'm having the same issue that you are.
Okay. Clayton, how about you?
I have not currently checked. I'm working on it.
Okay. All right. But let's jump back into here. Okay. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to start writing some EJS, but I'm just going to put it in the title. We don't have to do that, but I started to do that. And that's why I'm going to do it this way. All right. Don't ask me why. It's just, I was working on it. I was a little goofy. So that's what I did. All right. So what I want to do in here is I like this home page that's right here. I'd like it to appear on my screen like that, home page. In other words, I'd like it to be capitalized. Well, you know how to do this already. All right. But what I want to show you, all right, and we can do it here too. It doesn't matter. I'll do it down here. I did it in the title first, but I'll do it down here. So in here where it says this is the home page, I'm going to put single quotes around this entire thing. All right. And when I do that, all right, what I want to do is I'm going to want this to go into uppercase. Now, I'm going to show you something. This isn't all of it, but I want to be able to say dot to uppercase like this. But that's not sufficient the way it is, because what I'm doing is I'm writing straight JavaScript inside of the equivalent of HTML. So again, I actually want to write this. So I need the less than sign, the percent sign, and the equal sign. And I need to end this with a percent sign and a greater than sign. That's your first EJS. Okay. If you save that, and John, I guess you'd have to check it and tell me, but if you save that and go back and refresh the browser, it should say, this is the home page, and it should all be in uppercase. All right. Now, again, that's not supposed to be a gee whizzer type of thing where you're like, oh my God, how fantastic. But what I'm trying to show you is how we can go in and we can put in here. We can put some JavaScript. So for instance, if I came in here, and don't ask me why I'd want to do this, but if I typed in 17 times 23, all right, now it's going to say in uppercase, this is the home page, and then it should follow it with whatever that number is. All right, 391, I believe it is. All right, but the point is what you're seeing is we are embedding actual JavaScript inside of our EJS file, which basically is almost straight HTML. If we did this, it wouldn't work, because leaving that equal sign out says that we don't want to display anything. We do want to display this. So you must put in that equal sign. And again, I'm not trying to do this too fast or too slow. All right. And I'm just hoping that that makes some sense to you. All right. John, did you try it?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, good. So it said this is the homepage in caps and then
Yeah.
391.
No, when you do the math, it just gets an error, but the caps work.
What's that?
I said when you do the math, the 17 times 23, you get an error. It breaks it, but the dot two upper works.
Oh, okay. Well, when I tried it the other day, it worked. Okay, we're not going to worry about it anyway. Okay. All right, let's talk about when instead of putting in that equal sign, you would not want an equal sign. Okay, and if you say, I don't understand what you mean, you will in a matter of moments. All right, so I'm going to go back to my app.js and I'm going to create another route. So I'm going to put in here an app.get, and this will be a slash. We'll just call it, I don't know, what did I call it over here on mine? I think random. Okay. And again, it'll be with the request and the response. This stuff isn't going to change. All right. But what should make sense to you after we do this and I don't want to render that. I want to render our page called random. All right. So what should make sense to all of you after putting this one in is what we are trying to do right here. What we are trying to do is we're trying to render a different page. And it doesn't matter if you use single or double quotes there. I think by now you get that. All right. But we don't have a page that's called random.ejs. So we've got nothing to show. Let's fix that right now. So let's go back to here. And let's go in our books folder, right mouse click, new file, and we will put in random.ejs. And just like before, we could copy over the other one, but I'm just going to put in my exclamation point and hit enter so I get the template set up for me. And this I'm just going to put in here random number, something like that. All right. Now, let's put in another H1 tag, and I'm purposely dumbing this down. And what I mean is not that you guys are dumb. Please don't ever get that feeling that I'm saying that, but I'm trying to explain this with really, really simple examples because we're just getting into it. All right. So what we want here is we want a random number. So I'm going to put a Java or an HTML comment in here. Generate and display a random number between 1 and 100. And that should be simple enough that everybody gets it. All right. So what do we want to do there? All right. Well, we actually want to come in. We're just going to stick it in an H1 tag. Oops. All right. And I'm going to come in here and say random number. Now, you'll notice that part right there is not within our EJS tags. That's just raw text. All right. But now we actually want to put it in. So I'm going to put in here. And it is math.floor. You have to spell it right. Math.random. Let me turn that off so I can give you some more width. There we go. Math.random. I don't remember if it's upper or lowercase. All right. If it doesn't work, we'll have to stick it from lower to upper. All right. Math.random times 100 plus 1. All right. And when we're done, we want to end like that. So what that should do, and John, you can try it, I guess, and let us know. But what that should do is if you keep refreshing your browser, unless I made a mistake in there, which I Knowing me, I definitely could have. All right. But it should keep saying random number and then keep giving you, Jeffrey, it should keep giving you a random number that is between 1 and 100. All right. Now, you might look at that and go, you know what? That's just totally fine. All right. But when you showed us that, I mean, why did you even show us that? All right. In other words, why did you even put that in there? Well, this is giving us a random number. All right. But what if, when we were doing that random number, what if we wanted to go and add some more code in here? And I'm sorry, I have to go over here and let's see. I'm going to change this. What we just put in there. Why? You'll see it when I put it in, okay? All right. I wanted to be able to show you something where we were going to be using this stuff, but using some different tags. All right. Now, this isn't going to work because we're going to have to go back and make a change in our app.js file. All right. So don't worry about it. But what I want you to notice is here, we don't have an equal sign. All right. Ideally, what's going to happen in just a moment after we go back and make some changes in our app.js file, and it's just a very small change, it should say something like random number 87 in an H1 tag. Then in an H2 tag, it should say this is an odd number. If you refresh your browser and it comes up with 64, it should give you an H1 tag with random number 64. And then in an H2 tag, it should say this is an even number. So what I'm showing you in here is a combination of actually executable code and non-really executable code. All right. So we want to print something here. We don't want to print it here. But there's a couple things for you to notice about this. It's real easy to open up a tag and forget to close it. All right. It's real easy to do that. How do I know? Well, I'm talking from experience. Okay. The other thing that I've added onto my screen, and you may want to add it, you may not, but if you look right now, you'll notice that my parentheses and my curly brackets, they're different colors. All right. And I went over to here, and I think under extensions, I could be wrong, but I believe it's called, like, is it bracket colorizer? There's a couple of them. No, not that one. I think I must have used the rainbow. Rainbow brackets might be that one. You don't have to add these. But sometimes people ask, they go, how come your screen looks different than mine? That's why. All right. I kind of like these. Sometimes they're a pain in the butt when you've got a lot of different when you have a lot of different parentheses or brackets, because the colors can get a little bit bad. All right. But I want you to understand what's going on here. Again, we'll fix this in a moment. All right. But this is meant to generate a random number. And where's it getting this from? It's going to actually get this from our app.js file in just a moment. All right. I'm going to go back to the app.js file, and where we just call this books random right here, at the end of it, I'm going to put a comma in here and I'm going to add this. And that should make it work.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
you need your res.render, instead of double quotes, it needs to be single quotes. That's how mine's working.
All right. So he was saying use single quotes here. So let's save that. Let's go back. I'm not that way, and I'll take advice from anybody and everybody who's willing to give it to me. So let's see. Mine still isn't working. Right. So I don't know what the problem is, but like I said, I will have it fixed by tomorrow. I don't know what the problem is. I'd written this earlier and it worked, but I didn't save it. All right. So what we're doing here in this thing, oh, maybe that was, oh, that one's still a double quote. I don't know if that matters or not, but thought I changed all these, but now they should all be, as far as I know. This shouldn't matter, but I'm just going to put everything in single quotes. I could just do a search and replace, which probably would be a lot easier, but all right. So taking a look at it here, let's see. Okay, so let me do a file, save all, save, go back to here, here and refresh. Yeah, mine still isn't working for whatever reason. All right, but what I want to do is I want to explain what I did. All right, we added 2 routes so far. We've added this one, which should be our index route, and we've added this one. So when we go to this one, you see that mine is actually changing everything from single quotes back to double quotes. I changed all these, and it's changing them. So I've got some kind of an extension. It might be prettier that I put in that's doing that. I don't know. But I know I just changed them. In fact, I've changed them twice. But let's talk about this. This is our index route. So what should happen, all right, when we do the slash. So in other words, when we just go to books or books slash, it should bring up our index page. And our index page, all it's doing is it's putting out an H1 that says this is the home page in uppercase, and it should actually have the number 391 next to it. All right, it may not now, it will tomorrow. All right, then we went in and we created yet another route in here. And this was slash random. So if we go to books slash random, it should go there. And we are passing in here. All right, we are passing some information into this. Okay. What we can actually do, this is where what I wanted to show you, but again, none of this is, it's all been written longhand. I didn't write any of the rest of it. So ideally, you could take all of this code that's right here, virtually everything, and take all that code and put it in here. And then pass it from here, okay? Pass it from here to that other one. What the heck are you talking about, Jeff? All right. What I mean is, in an ideal world, when you write these templates, they should be dumb. And what I'm saying is, you shouldn't try to put too much logic in the template itself. All right. So we could have taken virtually and figured out whether or not it was odd or even. Also, you know, again, tomorrow I'll send this to everybody. All right. I'll get it to work and I'll send it to everybody by the end of the period today, hopefully. All right. But what I'm trying to get across to you is what we're doing is we're writing embedded JavaScript files. When we write embedded JavaScript files, we put them in a views folder. Under that views folder, we can choose to have other folders if we want to. All right. So this is where we're going to basically pick it up next time, but I want to mention a couple more things to you. The first is, years ago, when I was teaching in Wisconsin, I taught the PHP programming language. And one of the things that people liked about it so much was they first took a class very similar to the AWD1111 that you guys took. And what they're like, what they say is stuff like, you know what? This stinks. I'm repeating this code that you see in here in blue every single time. There must be a nicer way that you can just write it once and then include it in every file. So when we got into PHP, that's what we did. You can do the same thing in here. All right. You can do the same thing in here. And you create files, which typically you put into a folder that is named partials. All right. If that doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it. Because what I would like to do is be able to come in here and grab all this stuff, put it into a partial file, then come down here and put in a navigation bar from Bootstrap and put that into a partial file. Then come down here to the bottom and put in a footer and put that into a partial file. That's what we're building towards. All right. And while we're doing that, we're going to be bopping back and forth and actually attempting to set up routes. And the routes that we will be attempting to set up will be something along the lines of this. Don't key this in. This is just a comment. I'm going to get rid of it anyway. But when we put in something like localhost 2345/books, what will we want? We will want it to display all books. So all the books that we have in our system. When we put in localhost 2345/books:ID, we'll want it to display a single book. All right. When we put in localhost 2345, and remember, this, when we're doing this one, these will be GET requests. So these first two that I'm showing here, those will both be GET requests right there. So when we run them, we will run them inside a Postman and we will set the request type to GET. And in one case, we'll have just this. And in one case, we'll do this. When we do this first one, we should get a listing of all 8 of these books that we have in here. And when we do this one, we'll put an ID in there. There's a problem with that. All right, we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll resolve that tomorrow. All right, then we are going to have a thing down here, which is going to be for our post request. And when we do that and we put in localhost 2345/books, that should allow us to create a new book. That's what we'll want to do. So from CRUD, we've got the C for create right here. All right. And we've got the R for read right here. Now, sometimes what you see when people are doing this is they actually go out to this much stuff. In other words, in here, instead of saying /books like I've got, they might say /get all or something like that, or get all books. And in here, they might say /get one book or something along those lines. We're not going to go that far, but we could. And then in here, they'll say books / and then like create new book. It depends on how descriptive you want this to be. All right. I'm cool with just basically doing it like this, pluralized if we do a get, meaning that we want to show everything, and like this if we just want to show it singular. All right. It's still books. This is what's called right here. That's what's known as, that's our endpoint, books. All right, it's just something we're making up. All right, and in here again, we'll just do it like this to create a new book. All right, then we want to be able to come in here and do the rest of them. So in other words, we've got the C, we've got the R. All right, but we want to be able to come in here and do a patch request. And again, that'll look just like this one. In fact, it'll look just like this one. All right, but we won't display a single book. We'll be able to update a single book. All right, and then finally, just grab this. We'll want to come in here and put in our delete request. And that is singular, and that is all right. So what I'm getting to here, what I want you to start at least hopefully understanding is we are setting up the structure for our API. All right. That when we do this with a get, it'll be to display one book or all books. This with an ID to display a single book. This will allow us to create or add a new book. This will allow us to update and do a partial update, all right, of that. We could set it up if we wanted to have both a patch request and a put request if we wanted to do that. Patch, like I said, it's a little more pliable. You can do more things with it because it allows the partial. And I'll put in here, update partially a single book. All right, and this delete request, no, it won't. This will delete a single book. So in order to do that, we will need in here the colon ID. All right. And if you can at least fathom what we're trying to do here, if this makes even a little bit of sense to you, this is what we're going to be doing. So what I'm thinking is between tomorrow and Thursday to try to get this to work and get it to work with just those 8 books. Then change it around and bring in our database, because there's a couple things with databases I still haven't been really brought up to you yet. Bring that up, make sure we can hook up to the database. All right. But at least in my database, the one that I wrote for the books, I had multiple tables, and I believe everybody else did as well. All right. So the only one that we're worried about right now is the books table. And I'm hoping that either by the end of this week or the beginning of next week, all right, that we can get this working with the database, that we're able to go in and do these 4 different CRUD operations on our books that are in our database. And once we do those, all right, once we do those, they will be immediately reflected. So if we go into PHP My Admin, you'll immediately see new creation, new update, new deletes. All right. And once we get to that point, if we can get all that working, then we're almost done with the stuff I wanted to go through with MySQL. But what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to give you an entire week to work on it. It won't be a week of lab, but you'll get at least 1 or 2 days of lab next week. And that is, I want you to try to make this a complete running app, in that you're making a bookstore, for lack of better words. And you'll be able to do anything with books. You'll be able to do anything with categories. You'll be able to do anything with publishers. All right. And when we get to that point, all right, I'm going to show you the way that I did the database. And I've already got the stuff. I'm going to save it into an SQL file. You can either use your own stuff or mine. The advantage of using mine is I've got all the data in already. All right, so I've got all 29 of those books are in. I went last night, I had some errors in it. I fixed those and got that all to work. So I will give you that either tomorrow or on Thursday, but ideally tomorrow. And if I give it to you tomorrow, then anybody who still has anything due, as far as that book's for you, it better be into me by the beginning of class tomorrow, because if it's not fair to the people who did turn it in on time. All right? Okay. That was a lot to throw at you. And again, not everything worked. I'm going to go clean it up as soon as we finish, but I am done for the day. Did anyone have any questions on what we've gone over? Anybody? All right, so again, I will go back. I will clean up the app.js file. I will clean up the random.ejs file, and I will clean up the index.ejs file. All right, I'm going to try to do that by dinner time tonight. All right, and if I get it there, I'm going to take this. You already know where the repo is, but I'll push everything out to my repo. So if you'd rather not do it yourself, or you'd rather compare what you're working on with what I've got, you'll be able to do that. All right. So that's what I had for today, and we'll pick it up right here tomorrow then. Again, please, if you need to, please work on the revisions for your Node.js test, fixing up the BMI file, fixing up the loan app for the way I kind of showed you yesterday. All right. Or Monday, I guess it was, whatever that was yesterday. All right. See you tomorrow.